Welcome everybody to the Mind, Body, and Soul TV, coming to you live from our Denver, Colorado studios. I am your host, Coach Steve Todt, and also the founder of Conscious Evolution Media, now going on 12 years. And we have a very intriguing guest with us this evening. Our guest is Simon Fox. He's joining us, I believe, from Santa Barbara, California. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That's a beautiful place. Been there, done that. Great. And the theme of the show for this evening is Adventures in Caring. And so I think we're going to find out a little bit about kindness and compassion and who knows what else. And starting the show very powerfully, we always ask, or I always ask, if I took away your title, like executive director and all the other titles anybody has ever called you, Simon, what's left? Who is really Simon Fox?
I'm just a child of God like you, who is finding their way through the universe. And I think that what I love the most is that direct connection when all barriers are down and it's just you and your maker. And that's when things get real for me. And so, yeah, humbly, that's what I feel.
Okay, awesome. All right, so Adventures in Caring. Give us a little short story just so that we can relate to you as to how long this organization has been around, how did it get started, why did it get started? Give us the shorter version.
Sure. Well, my wife started it.
Okay.
and that began in 1984. So 32 years.
Wow.
And it was an inspiration she had while sitting at her desk at a doctor's office, having got news that cancer that she had earlier in her life may have returned. She was still a young woman at that point with 2 children at home, single mom, and it was devastating. And at the same time, she's working for doctors. She glanced down at her desk to gain some composure after hearing this news over the phone, and saw a magazine with a rag doll on the back of it, reminded her of something that provided comfort to her in childhood. And she said to the doctor she was working with, what do you think about this idea? What if I dress up as Raggedy Ann and walk in the hospital on my lunch hours to be of comfort and a source of support to the patients who may not have any other visitors? And the doctor, who was a very conservative physician in his 70s, said, I think it's a great idea. And he had some clout in the community. He said, I'll call the hospital right now. I'll back you up.
It always sounds like to me, Simon, is like Mother Teresa disguised as a Raggedy doll.
Well, hopefully we could live up to that. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely that same heart. Absolutely, it's.
I've got that energy when I went to your website. I got that energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was Mother Teresa who said, I don't think the greatest poverty in the world is hunger or homelessness. I think it's not being wanted or needed by anybody. And that's really what we're addressing, is that social isolation and being abandoned, especially when you're sick or injured. And so that was what Karen was doing, and it was an experiment. She didn't know if it would work, and she's not an extrovert. This was a major stretch for her. She'd never even gotten.
Is that why she's not on?
No, I wish that were the reason. No, I would love to have Karen do this. She used to do them. She has had health challenges her whole life, and they're pretty bad right now. So she's not well enough to do this. And that's one of the main reasons she could understand patients and what they were going through, because she'd been one a lot since early as a child. And the other reason she could understand patients very well was that she'd lived overseas most of her life. So she'd been exposed to all kinds of cultures and languages, and I mean, when she was 8, she was interacting with lepers in the marketplace in Ethiopia and getting sheets for them and things like that. So she's gifted at connecting with people. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't just the raggedy persona. It was, she had a serious skill set underneath the wig. But the raggedy created what the nurses would call a safe character. And nobody really feels safe in a hospital because you're worried and you're wondering and oh heck, you know. And so
I'm worried about getting sick in a hospital.
What's that?
I'm worried about getting sick in a hospital.
Well, yeah, exactly. Most people are. The infection rates can be pretty bad sometimes.
And we go there to get healed.
Yeah, exactly. And you walk in the door and the stress level cranks up, which compromises your immune system and your cardiovascular system and all kinds of things, and while you're trying to get better. And so part of it, what we're really discovering is that compassion is the antidote to that. It brings the stress level down and creates the magic of human connectedness. And that's what Karen was gifted at. She used the raggedy as a calling card, so to speak, to introduce, well, basically to announce this is clearly not a medical conversation. This is something else. And patients would welcome that. And like I said, it was experimental. Nobody knew if this would work or not. It worked famously. And doctors noticed, and the nurses noticed, chaplains noticed. And she was eventually asked, she was always asked, could you come see our patients? Could you come on this unit, that unit? And eventually it was like too much. And could she train anybody else to do that? And that was really around the time when I met Karen, where she was being asked to teach others these skills. And I don't have those skills. When I saw what she was doing with patients, it was amazing to me. Because probably can't tell from my accent, but I'm originally from England, and my background's in science, and I was very reserved.
It's pretty much gone, yeah.
I
don't hear the English accent.
But
I'm really from Europe. I'm from Europe as well, so we have a lot in common.
Yeah, so when I saw her go in sometimes dressed as raggedy, and she had to mask and gown because of the immune systems of the patients. And then she'd be visiting with somebody who had very serious illnesses, dying of leukemia, in a lot of pain. And 10 minutes into the conversation, they're telling jokes. There's laughter in the room. And I was wondering, I was there, but I was still wondering what the heck just happened. Because I don't know how to do that, you know, and I had some background in management training too. And so when she was trying to figure out, well, how is this a gift or is it transferable? Can it be taught? And so we spent better part of a year trying to figure out, could it be taught by doing trainings and testing and seeing how the volunteers did. And eventually we figured out a reliable methodology, and it's continued to improve, and we've been doing it 30 plus years. So now we train pre-med students mostly. So they learn these skills of how to interact with people who are suffering deeply before they go to medical school. And so that's what we've been doing.
So I'm curious about a few things. One is, I interviewed probably thousands of people from the healthcare industry in the past 12 years. What's interesting to me is that I feel that kindness and compassion is already part of who they are. Otherwise, they couldn't do the job that they're signing up for. I think it's impossible for a nurse to be a nurse and last any reasonable amount of time in a hospital if she doesn't have kindness and compassion. What do you think about that?
I think that's largely true, but not totally. And what we found.
Why not? Why not totally true?
Well, first of all, there are people who get into the profession because they're interested in the scientific side of things. They're interested in it as a technical skill, especially if you get into surgery, things like that. And there are more and more technical aspects of nursing too. So there's that aspect of it. It's easy to lose touch with, well, not easy, but you can lose touch with it. What we found is compassion is not a static thing. It's fluid, if anything. And so
it's really a connection, isn't it, Simon? It's your ability and my ability, and we're doing it right now. We're connecting with one another. So if that connection, if when people are not able to make that happen, then what ends up happening is you get disconnected.
Right.
And when you get disconnected, anything can happen, and very ugly things can occur.
Yes.
Because we no longer, connected to what or whom. Who are we connected to, Simon?
Who are we connected to?
Yeah, when you and I are connecting, who are we connected to?
Well, one another, ourselves, and if you want to think of it this way, our higher selves, the better angels of our nature. A more universal field, if you will. That's how I see it and try and stay in touch with that. I mean, the compassion, the way we define it and talk about it, we go back to the original Latin root of the word, which is compati, which is two parts of it. Either you've got com, together, and pati, to suffer or to feel intensely. So putting those together, it's the art of being with someone who's suffering. And we usually think of compassion as the giving to somebody who doesn't have, or the doing for somebody who can't do it for themselves. But there's a third aspect of it, and that's what we specialize in, which is the being with someone. And that's what is the thing that fundamentally alleviates that loneliness when someone is seriously ill or injured or in pain. Because when someone's in that condition, even if you're in a room full of people, you can feel very alone. And it takes an effort to build a bridge to that other person at that time, because even though you might be in the same room together, you're actually in two different worlds, because you're in a healthy body and you can walk out of there and you've still got your future intact. And the person who's in the hospital bed or the nursing home bed doesn't. They don't. Their future is highly uncertain. Their future may be very different than what they hoped it would be, and they're worried and they feel isolated. And it takes effort to build a bridge. I mean, it's easier for you and I. We're in relatively healthy bodies. We can communicate. We can see each other and hear each other pretty well. But when the senses start to fade and pain starts to kick in, it's harder.
Okay, so Simon, let me ask you this. So ultimately, do you believe that we create our reality?
I guess it depends on what you mean by we.
Each individual human being, are we responsible for creating our own reality? And are we actually doing it? Or is life just happening to us? Are we a victim of life? Or are we responsible for creating everything that happens in our life, including being sick?
I don't agree with either position, actually.
Okay.
To me, it's a co-creative process. I think it's incredibly callous when people think that, oh, you're sick, you've created that reality. I'm sorry you got leukemia, but somehow you must have created it yourself. I mean, it's incredibly, horribly, cruelly callous to go from that angle. Now, if somebody has been a chain smoker all their life and they've got lung cancer, clearly they have contributed to that. So I think, yes, people do partly contribute to their own situation, but there's also it's like we can make a difference in life, but then sometimes life makes a difference in us, where things happen in our lives that come out of the blue that we didn't see coming. and seemingly no fault of our own, not even in our own imagination, things happen. And so in my world, there's still a give and take on that one.
Okay. So yeah, I'm going to respect your belief. That's perfectly fine. I respect everyone's. But tell me this then. So do you believe that we are living in a world that's pretty much designed by duality? Like, in order for light to be, there has to be darkness. In order to have love, there has to be hate. Do you believe that? Like, one doesn't exist without the other.
Clearly, the universe develops through like laws of gender and polarity and things like that, and the interplay between the two. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question.
So let me go back to the beginning. Let me go back to the beginning, a few thousand years. So it started with good and evil. Do you believe in that?
No, actually.
No. Okay. You don't believe in that. Okay. So you believe. So what would be the opposite of compassion and kindness?
Indifference. And yeah, a certain kind of callous indifference.
Yeah, you said it already. What about kindness? What would be the opposite of kindness?
No, cruelty.
Cruelty, yeah. So what do we do with those? Because I understand that you are completely for compassion and kindness. I get it.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel it. I feel it from you. I feel it from the website. I feel it from what you guys been doing, what the organization is doing. But I'm trying to figure out, for me, what do you do with the opposite of these things?
Okay. Well, our methodology for communicating compassion has 4 ingredients to it, and the practicing of them also applies even if no matter what you're encountering. So it's, in fact, we've done a whole program on difficult situations, because occasionally nurses will run into patients who are horrible to them. And is it possible to address that with compassion? And it is.
I experienced it myself. I experienced the cruelty and the opposite of compassion in the healthcare industry on me.
Yeah, right. I believe it. I'm not surprised. It does happen.
So it does exist. I'm just curious what people do with it. Do they say that it doesn't exist, or do we just kind of put it under the rug?
No, I mean, the whole thing about compassion and kindness, it has to have it has to be authentic, it has to be honest. There's no, rose-colored glasses or something like that. It's no, you deal with the ugliness and the cruelty and the disdain and the demeaning stuff.
And how do you deal with it? I'm just curious about this.
I think it's more about, you develop a capacity to live life wholeheartedly. And even when something dark comes your way, first of all, compassion is eyes open. And you're more likely to see it coming, and you're more likely to understand where it's coming from and deal with it effectively if you're more aware of it. And so sweeping things under the rug and pretending things are different doesn't help. It's just embracing things. And what I talk about often in the way we do classes is you turn a difficult conversation into a discovery conversation. So it's more about, well, I wonder why they're acting that way. And being curious, like a healthy kind of curiosity is like, I wonder why they're yelling at me right now.
Yeah.
And even finding a way to ask a question is like, Well, I can tell you're upset. Can you say more about that? And being interested in their experience. Because that's at the root of good listening, is being interested in somebody else's experience. And it's amazing what happens. Like, we've had our volunteers, I mean, we have 17, 18, 19-year-old kids going into rooms, and occasionally the patients yell at them. Like, what the hell are you doing in here? Get out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And we teach them how to respond graciously to that, understanding that 9 times out of 10, it's got nothing to do with them personally. It's because the person's in pain, or they're uncertain, or they're afraid, and they're just yelling at somebody, and you happen to be in the way. So I think the path to compassion, it begins with a certain amount of bravery to meet that challenge and be inquisitive about what's going on here, because it's not always the way it seems. And just the very act of being interested in their experience tends to immediately diffuse the situation. I'm not saying it's not every single time, but I would say it's like 9 out of 10. And plus, in the process, by taking an interest in their experience, you tend to learn about them. You develop empathy, and out of that empathy comes compassion. So I hope that wasn't too long a winded way.
I was just curious here, just the same way you were describing curiosity, because just my experience these days is that I am allowing for all my experiences, whatever it is that I'm going through, because by resisting it, doesn't really work for me. And I'm not suggesting this to anyone. I'm just sharing that that's how I live my life. Is that as I'm noticing, I'm sure that one of the important things that you guys teach is what is the number one thing people do to other human beings? Well, they judge them, right? And there is there's an amazing possibility to judge people in a hospital. There's so many things you can judge them for, depending on how they look, how sick they are. I mean, there's just a plethora of ways you could judge people. So how do you teach interns about that? I'm just curious, because this is really about humanity, as far as I can tell. This is about being as good of a human being as we can be, and allowing for basically anything to occur in our experience. Because as soon as we pick a side, we're in trouble.
Yeah, especially when you're in a healing encounter, a healing situation, And so how do we teach interns that? Well, we have what you might call a rite of passage.
Let me change that. How do you unteach it? That just occurred to me, because they're already very good at how to do it. So you have to unteach.
Oh, you mean how do you unteach the judgmentalism?
Yes.
Well, essentially, we have what amounts to be like a rite of passage type of training. So the act, and it involves introduction to a communication model, but then it involves actually visiting real patients. And for young people, this is an eye-opener. Their first encounter with someone with a stroke or Alzheimer's disease, or who is dying, for real. So we've already given them some tools. We've taken their ego away from them and put them in a raggedy uniform, which is the very symbol of humility. I mean, dressed in rags, symbolically.
You actually ask them to dress up like that? Like your wife used to dress up? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's part of the training.
Very interesting.
So
they
have to check their ego at the door in order to be of service. It's
okay. That's good.
And so plus, when one is in a stance of humility, it makes you a better listener. Because if you do not have the authority or the power, you're watching and listening more carefully than if you do. So
plus you're feeling a little silly in the outfit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It is humbling. Oh, absolutely. And that's part of it, because the patient that they're visiting doesn't have their A game going either. Mm. Neither one has their nice professional got it together ego on. And the patients relate to that, because the patient's a little frayed around the edges and raggedy and tattered too.
Yeah.
Right.
So the pretending game is temporarily switched off, is what you're saying.
Yes, it is. It is. It's interesting. It's a paradox. We're using a fictional make-believe character to get at what's real in life.
That's very good.
And
that's very good.
So they're put into that situation. We give them really good guidelines on how to engage, but then they jump in and they engage. And then we bring them back to the classroom, and then we debrief. And they have experienced volunteers with them who coach them along the way. They coach them afterwards. We do this several times. So it's more akin to training than it is to education. So because it's not enough to know about it.
Right. You have to have the experience of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is they experience getting rejected, like, oh, you look stupid, or things like that. Right. And it's essentially an inoculation against ridicule. And they get used to it. They learn to do it, and they learn to encounter, and they learn to see past the appearance of this broken down old body of a person they're interacting with. Because what happens is, they're visiting people 4 or 5 times their age, who grew up in a different part of the world, often speaking a different language, believing something entirely different. And what happens is they find they've got something in common. That experience is very powerful. And that's what starts to break down the judgmentalism. It's like, oh, I thought she had nothing to offer, and I found out she used to be a biochemistry professor who wrote mystery novels and was behind the lines in World War II. It's
right. So there's going to be like a connection moment where it's like I call it an aha moment.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden, and it could be the same at the same time for both people, or it could be at different times, but there's going to be something that's going to go like, oh wow, I'm talking to somebody, like me, and I get it. And I get it. We're really not that, we're different, but we're not really that different.
Right. And that's the antidote, I think, to judgmentalism. It just breaks it.
Yeah,
it's gone.
just to recognize that we are connected, and I don't want to say the cliche that we are all one, because that could be a whole other show. All the misunderstandings people have about what does that mean that we're all one, because everybody wants to be a quote unquote individual. They don't want to be all one. But in that aha moment, there is that oneness. We get to it, and we feel it, and we experience it, and I think that's an amazing moment. So this is really important stuff that you guys are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It is.
And the healthcare industry is beating themselves into the ground because of what happens with the insurance, and what happens with the money, and what happens with all the other things that becomes more important, than the patient themselves. This is so ridiculous. It's like in the school system, this is the same. Like in the school system, everybody says this is in the interest of the child. But guess what? Everything else comes in front of the interest of the child. But what we all say is this is being done for the interest of the child. Baloney. Yeah. And in the healthcare industry, it's probably the same. They say this is being done for the interest of the patient. But guess what? That's not the real truth.
Right. And that's why, in the research, the best term that fits what we do is called relationship-centered care. A lot of hospitals are trying to move towards patient-centered care, or at least they do in their PR. but there's a step beyond that, which is relationship-centered care, where, like we've just been talking about, is the connection is the medium of healing.
Right.
Because everything is accomplished through relationships. All work and all creativity and all endeavors, He's doing stuff with people.
Mm.
And a lot of medicine got stuck in the do for mode, which is like we the experts will do it for you.
Yeah, and we will give you a quick fix to your problem,
Yeah,
whatever that problem is, and then you go away, and then when the quick fix doesn't work or wears off, come back and we'll do something else.
right.
Another quick fix.
Yeah. So we're empowering young people who will be our future doctors and nurses and allied health professionals to know that there's a different way, where their connection with their patients forms the partnership that produces healing. Because ultimately, I mean, there's tons of research out there that shows, for example, the patient's perception of empathy is directly related to how long they stick with the medical regimen. So if they think their doctor's got their back, they'll take the pills, the full course of them. If they don't, they bail on it halfway, which obviously undermines the medical outcome. So it's both. I mean, there's all kinds of, what I'm happy about is the science is starting to show evidence that a compassionate connection does a lot of things biologically as well as psychologically. And that is starting to, there's research coming out of UCLA about the genes that turn on or off in the presence of compassion. And they got a lot to do with inflammation. And how it affects, how that connectedness lowers the threat level, which affects the immune system and cardiovascular, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of that coming along, but then there's the skill of actually doing it and connecting.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of this stuff that's been talked about for the last several decades, but the acceptance of them is very minimal, I find. Science has proven a lot of things as to how things work, but it's almost like people go, "Oh, okay, yeah, I heard that, but yeah, I'm just going to continue just the way I did it yesterday."
No, I mean that's why we didn't wait. We just got started and go, what can we do at our level, at a grassroots level? And we started by teaching all kinds of volunteers, and we eventually hit a sweet spot with the local university where young people were hungry to know this kind of material and learn these skills. And so we thought, okay, that's who we'll work with. And there's already hundreds of them throughout the country who are doctors, who are nurses, who are now teaching their students these skills. So
that's very good. So tell me, how is this being accepted with existing staff, like staff that has not gone through this training or this different way of thinking? How is it being accepted or not?
Well, I think it is. What I've been speaking with you about is essentially our volunteer intern program. But out of that, we started producing materials because a lot of people wanted to know, how the heck do you teach that? And because of Karen's health, we didn't have the ability to run around the country and do it. We did quite a few talks locally and regionally. But anyway, we created videos and entire programs that we can put in the mail to people, and they can use them. And a lot of hospitals do. I mean, right now, about 1,000 hospitals use our materials and about 1,000 hospices. Well, so as far as it being accepted, yeah, reasonably so. And an international group of nurse educators just started applying our latest program, Oxygen for Caregivers, in other countries, as well as throughout North America. So,
awesome.
Yeah, so to some degree, it has. I mean, some institutions are very slow to change, and others are accelerating and getting with the program really, really well.
Right. So what I'm also reading in between the lines is that really what you also teaching here, what you opening up is for people to connect to themselves. None of this is possible, what you've been describing on the show so far, that I can tell, if people don't connect with who they are. it's not possible, because then it just becomes pretending, the good old game. And what you're basically teaching, what we've been teaching for the last 12 years, which is come home to yourself. The answers to all of our questions and needs and wants are all in here. It's not out in the world. Most everybody's looking out there. They're going to find it somewhere, in a car, in a house, in a wife, in a husband, whatever. But that ain't it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that ain't it.
No, well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we, it's like you can't give what you don't have, right? So and that's why we created our last program, where we've got we've got a trilogy on compassion now, which is one, the first module is the basics of how do you convey it from A to B, how do you get it across. Second one is how do you do that under difficult circumstances, and then the third one is how do you look after yourself in the process. And it's that third module that's all about how do you return home to you, and the healing connections that anchor you to who you are. And so that's what that program is about, and that's the one that's starting to be taught internationally. And it's simply because young people started to ask us. We did it because young people said, I want to go into medicine, it's noble work, or I want to be a nurse, it's noble work. They look ahead 20, 30 years ahead of them, the people on the career path, and say, but I don't want to be like them. I don't want to burn out. So they started asking us the question, how do I not burn out? And we just felt it was a very fair question, and it needed a good, honest answer too. We didn't have it at the time, and we went looking and realized essentially the method that we'd been teaching all along on how to connect with others was the right one to use to connect with yourself. It was just reflecting back to you those same principles. We eventually called them the ABCs of resilience. And so, but yes, I agree. You've got to source it with you, and that just gets ever stronger.
Right, fantastic. So, well, our conscious half hour is over. We actually went over a little bit, but it was certainly worthwhile. I am absolutely impressed. This is very important work, especially in the healthcare industry. You couldn't have timed it better than where it is today. I know it's taken you quite a few years to get to where you are, but I feel that you're in the perfect place, the perfect time to do this, because there's nothing else that's going to help with the mess that we have created. So fantastic work. I acknowledge you tremendously, and your wife as well, the founder that started all of this. So good luck with the work. Thank you for being on the network. I really appreciate you, Simon, very much, to come on and share this with us. Tell everybody out there that's watching now or is going to be watching it in the future, where can they go to learn more about it?
Oh yeah, go to our website. If you've ever wondered if love has a healing power, go to the website. It's www.adventuresincaring.org.
Awesome. Thank you. And then they can support you however they want to support you, or they can
it's a nonprofit
sign up for
venture.
Yeah. So give some energy in terms of money.
Please.
Yeah, certainly. All right, and so everybody else out there, if things that Simon has presented here to all of us today touched, moved, and inspired you, please continue to watch this program and also all the other programs, and we have thousands of them on YouTube. And the more you watch them, the more they get up to the top 10 every month. If they do get up to the top 10 because of you watching them, and clicking on them, then they may go to public television or cable TV. So thank you so much for being here, and have a great evening. And we'll see you guys on the next show, always at 7 p.m. on consciousevolutionmedia.com. Thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you, Steve. Okay.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Bye.